Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In the intro montage of this video, I was working on finishing up these are two collectors for my 2JZ GE Gen 2 manifolds. So they're T4 twin scroll, twin 44, 45, 46 millimeter wastegates, and these, as well as these two GE head flanges right here and a bunch of the pipe in this box, will become two 2JZ GE manifolds that will be for sale shortly. But this video is not about that. It's not an ad for the products that I offer. What we are going to go over in this episode is determining the materials for the exhaust for the Mark II. So the last video went ahead and I built this tube header that the turbo is sitting on right now. And in this episode, we need to figure out from the turbine outlet to the rear of the car what materials are necessary to go from point A to point B. So I have all the tools assembled to make this list, and frankly, the only tools that are necessary are some sort of a writing utensil and a sheet of paper. So with these, and then my eyeballs and my brain, I'm going to go ahead and figure out this list. And like you saw on the piece of paper there, we're going to begin with the downpipe. So with this downpipe, obviously we're coming out of the turbo right here, and we need to go down, hence the name, somewhere in this area down here. Making sure to not get too close to the firewall, to not get too close to any other critical items, or any other thing sticking out of the firewall, like this. I'm assuming it's an AC drain right here, and any of the vacuum lines or anything. So this one, it appears as though there's quite a bit of room, so it shouldn't be anything too crazy or too wild to get it figured out. But let's go ahead and get to it. So looking at this piece, or looking at this space right here rather, I can tell that we obviously need some sort of an angle coming out of the downpipe, or coming out of off of the turbine flange rather. We need to make our way down here. So we'll have angle, we'll have straight, and then probably an angle down on the bottom, just to get a little bit of a kick to get it to run kind of parallel to the bottom of the car. But focusing on this up here right now, this is somewhere between a 45 degree and a 90 degree angle, or 90 degree bend, I should say. So with that in mind, I will choose a 90 degree bend coming off of the turbine flange, because a 90 degree bend can be anything from 90 degrees down to whatever angle you need that is less than that. So for instance, if I need a 60 degree bend, I can cut 30 degrees off of the 90 degree bend, get my 60 degree bend, and then have a 30 degree bend left over in case I need it for anything else for the rest of the track of the exhaust. So I always like to order more materials than less for things like this, because you never know what you're going to run into, what incidentals, what botched cuts, so on and so forth. And it pays dividends to have a little bit more material than a little bit too little material. So in terms of the downpipe, what else do we need aside from some tubing? Well, we need provisioning for an O2 sensor, we need the turbine outlet flange, and we need a V-band flange for the outlet of the downpipe so it can connect to the rest of the exhaust and be able to be disassembled, because we don't want to run the exhaust all one piece from the turbine outlet out to the back of the car, as that would just be a nightmare and cumbersome to deal with. So the other thing that I need to take into account with this particular downpipe, if you look at the turbine outlet flange, it's kind of an oval shape as opposed to just round. So with that in mind, I need to use whatever my angle is to get the direction going down towards the bottom of the car, but I also need to get a second portion of a bend to kind of tie in this lower section right here and make everything flow together and work together that way. So there'll be some semi-complex cutting and fitting and everything else that will go into this, but for right now I just need to I need to order enough materials to accommodate having to do that. And I did measure this width right here, or what will end up being the diameter of the tubing that I'm working with. And the first section of the downpipe, at least, will be 2.5 inch. And from there, I will step up to 3 inch, as I'd like to run a 3-inch exhaust out the back of the car, so that way I'm not dealing with any restrictions that way. So we have 2.5 inch off of the turbine flange, transitioning to 3 inch somewhere along the track of this. And I have an interesting idea of how I would like to do that transition, but we will get to that when it comes time to actually build the downpipe. So with all of that in mind, for the downpipe, I came up with this list right here. So we have two 2.5 inch 90-degree bends to make that kind of odd turbine outlet flange transition piece. We have a straight section as well as a 2.5 inch to 3 inch transition, and I'm guessing that it will be approximately 2 feet overall of tubing that I need to get underneath of the car. We have a 3-inch V-band assembly, we have an O2 bung, we have a turbine outlet flange, and a 3-inch 90-degree bend for the bottom side of the downpipe that will be underneath of the car, and that 3-inch 90 will help to change the direction of the exhaust and allow us to start making our way to the back of the car. Now with the car up in the air, we can start working on the list for the bottom section, or the midpipe of this exhaust, as I'm going to divide this up into 3 sections: downpipe, midpipe, and tailpipe we'll call it. So once we get down past the firewall and going underneath of the car, you can see with the old heat shielding kind of the path that the exhaust needs to take. It needs to come along the inside of the frame rail, make its way over to the center of the car, make its way down, and then make its way through this pocket in the subframe, and then back out to the rear. So for the midpipe, if we get down kind of into this section in here, we have our 3-inch 90-degree bend on the list for the downpipe already. That will be kind of the end of the downpipe, beginning of the midpipe. We also have the V-band assembly written on there. So I don't need to write another V-band assembly in, as the V-band assembly comes with 2 V-band flanges in 1 clamp. So that assembly that's listed out for the downpipe it's comprehensive for both the outlet of the downpipe and the inlet of the midpipe. So the midpipe itself, we need some straight, we need a bend, some more straight, another bend, some straight, a bend, and so on and so forth. So looking at this right here, we can deal with loose radius bends underneath of here because we have ample space, especially with 3-inch tubing. Since 3-inch tubing is not that large, it isn't that cumbersome to fit underneath of a car. So we'll do a 2-foot straight section, probably a 45, let's do another 2-foot straight, 45, 2-foot straight, and I'll probably terminate the midpipe somewhere after the subframe, maybe in this pocket right here seems like a good place for it. So we'll need another V-band assembly right there, and I think that should be about it for the midpipe. It should be pretty simple. So nothing too crazy or too cumbersome for this. And I know that some of the stuff on the bottom of the car, like this old heat shield, is not the most sightly thing, but bear in mind the car is 40 whatever years old, so it just kind of is what it is. The other thing I need to take into account with this is the drive shaft, as obviously from the output of the transmission to the input on the differential up in there, we'll have a shaft running from point A to point B there that will take up some space, and I will need to be cognizant of that, especially in this area past the heat shield, that I don't run the exhaust into the drive shaft. Is that they're not supposed to be one piece that way, or they're not supposed to be contacting each other. So I'll need to remember that as I'm building this, and I'll need to build around it. And the drive shaft, at least a portion of it, is right here, and the other half of it is somewhere around here. But I'll just need to pay attention to that to make sure that I have ample clearance to it and don't cause any interference issues that way. To eliminate some of the guesswork as far as the straight tubing is concerned, I'm going to go ahead and get some rough measurements from the downpipe outlet, or kind of the area where I think that it's going to terminate at, back to this area here where the midpipe is going to terminate. So this, you don't have to be super precise with this. You always want, like I said before, a little bit of extra material as opposed to too little material. So for each of these measurements, wherever I end up, like say that I measure out 18 inches for one section, I'll just round that up to 2 feet, as I would rather have the additional 6 inches to trim off of a piece of tube than come up 6 inches short. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me go ahead and measure out the rough straight sections for this. With some simple measuring that way, I came to the conclusion that I need probably about 8 feet of straight tubing to make the midpipe work the way that I want it to. And I also want to put a resonator in there at some point just to kind of kill some of the harsh tones that could possibly be produced by this engine running, as I want this thing to be kind of enjoyable to drive. I don't want it to be like the Mark IV with a fender exit. I want it to be more along the lines of the Mark IV with the titanium street exhaust on it, nice and quiet. So I'll factor in a resonator to this and 8 feet of straight tubing, and then we should have the list for the midpipe. So on our list here, I have 5 45-degree bends, leaving 1 extra 45-degree bend from how I had figured this out. 8 feet of straight tubing, a resonator, and a V-band assembly for the midpipe outlet going into the tailpipe. So now that we have the midpipe materials listed, let's go ahead and figure out the tailpipe, or will it be tailpipes? So for this car, I think I'm going to end up building 2 tailpipe sections for it. One will be a muffled tailpipe, and one will be a straight tailpipe for if and when I want the car to be loud. So, in order to accomplish this, we need to figure out the materials for it, obviously. So if we terminate the midpipe somewhere in this area, that means we have to go from here to back here, somewhere towards the rear of the car. And you can see some soot tracing on the lower part of the bumper as well as the upper part, and I'd like to alleviate that if at all possible. So this should be fairly straightforward. We have a bit of a bend right here, or if we accommodate that bit of a bend for the in the midpipe, it's kind of a straight shot back to, I don't know, somewhere in this area, and then we will need to kick up, kick over, and come straight out with our muffler. So that looks to me like straight section 45, 45, into our straight through the muffler. So that covers the muffler section. Now what about the straight pipe section? So the initial form will be about the same, coming straight, having a bit of an angle, coming straight, and for the straight pipe outlet, I'd like it to kick a little bit, kind of the JDM angle that you've seen on other Supras and cars like that. So, and I'd also like this to be a little bit larger outlet, whether it be a 3.5 inch or 4 inch outlet that comes out this way. So with that in mind, I think that I have enough information to make the list for the tailpipe. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we can sit down to the computer and actually compile all of this and get a more concrete materials list. The one part that I almost forgot, but is extremely, extremely crucial, are hangers. Now, I like to hang exhausts in as many places as I can to keep them from moving around as much as I can. So I'm going to look for factory hanger locations on this car, so I'm not reinventing the wheel and having to build brackets and things like that. I can just use the factory brackets, hang off of those, and everything will be well. So I don't know if this right here and this right here are hangers, but we'll at least factor in for those right now, or at least for one of them. So we'll need one hanger rod and rubber or silicone hanger up here. So there's one hanger assembly. Coming towards the back of the car, I have another spot right here for the second hanger assembly. And moving back to the rear, we have this old poorly executed hanger here, which I'll need to build a bracket and everything for this. So we need third hanger assembly and bracket materials, and then back to the rear, another hanger that I'm not super stoked on, and this will be a fourth assembly and bracket deal. So we need four hanger assemblies, and we need materials to build 2 brackets, and we need obviously rubber silicone hangers as well. That takes care of the titanium side of it, and the actual hanger brackets I need to make on the car, I'll source those materials locally, as they'll just be stainless and not anything crazy. So with all of this stuff on here, I'm kind of scared to see what MSRP is on it, but let's scroll down and see, or I guess let's take some predictions. I see 1100, 750, 500. I suspect this is probably $4,000 worth of materials. This will be a very expensive exhaust, even though I'll get a decent amount off using my account with Taycan. Just goes to show that something, even a fairly simple exhaust like this, where I'm not doing anything too crazy or too outlandish, it totals up really fast once you start adding a bunch of features and adding a bunch of materials to make an exhaust like this become a reality. So with the materials list done for the Mark II's exhaust at this point, I sent an inquiry to Taycan to see what materials are available, to see what's in stock and everything else, and to get the ball rolling with this exhaust build. So it's something that I'm really looking forward to, as I have never seen an exhaust like what I'm going to build for this car on a Mark II before. But again, one of my favorite things about this stage, or this portion of building cars, is the fact that they are a blank canvas, and I can take all this open space and turn it into, or fill it with beautiful parts and with things that I think are really cool. So these talking videos are not my favorite ones to film. I'm sure they're not your favorites to watch either, but it's a very necessary part of building cars and doing projects and things like that. Without having concise lists, all this is just guesswork, and anybody who's been doing welding and fabrication for any period of time has done the guesswork before and can tell you that it does not typically end very well. So with all of the exhaust materials organization done and all the materials figured out for that matter, I think that will be about the end of this episode. So like I offered before when we did the materials for the header build, if that project materials spreadsheet is something that you are interested in and something that you think will benefit you at your shop or in your endeavors, please feel free to send me an email. I will put my email address somewhere on the screen right now, and it is alex@bpautosports.net. Send me an email requesting that spreadsheet, and I'd be happy to send it over to you, and hopefully it will be a benefit and a value add to you. But with all of that being said, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys, as always, for coming along on all these different adventures and all these different journeys with me week after week, as I turn my harebrained ideas into practical, functional parts. And Hopefully you guys are still deriving some value and getting some bit of knowledge out of it. I'm having a lot of fun making these videos, and just hopefully they are benefiting you guys as they are benefiting me. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you very much for coming along on all these different adventures with me, and I look forward to many more upcoming in the future. But with all of that being said, that will be about the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way, and I will see you all in the next episode.